The story depicts a young man who is feeble and bedridden. Suddenly, he opens his eyes and lets out a piercing scream, realizing that he had been beheaded by the Demon Queen just moments ago. Was it all just a dream, he wondered? As he looks around, he finds himself in an unfamiliar place, certainly not his own room. The surroundings seem so luxurious. It is the heavenly demon divine cult inner sanctuary. Soon after he sensed someone approaching, a maid named Manhwa enters the room carrying a tray of food. However, she notices that he is not in his bed. Without making any noise, the young lord stealthily sneaks up behind her, holding a chopstick to her neck as a threat. He demands to know who she is and whether she belongs to the Steel Blood Fortress. After realizing she's just a servant, Manhwa implores the young lord to calm down and tell her what's going on. However, he insists that she stop talking nonsense and tell him the truth. He questions her about how he ended up in this room, to which she reveals that he has been here for the past 6 months, unconscious due to QI blockage. He had only awoken 2 nights ago. As he listened to her, the protagonist couldn't help but wonder, what the hell is she saying? He lost consciousness because of QI blockage? He vividly recalled dying just moments ago, and the explanation he was receiving made little sense to him. As their conversation continued, his attention was drawn to the reflection in the mirror. But what he saw there was not himself, it was someone else entirely. The shock of this realization left him reeling. Who is this bastard? He wondered, still struggling to comprehend the situation. As he grappled with the strangeness of it all, he couldn't help but wonder if this was some form of reincarnation. Memories flooded back to him, memories of a previous life as a skilled assassin known as Hajin. He had fought against countless enemies, single-handedly taking them down one by one. Despite being vastly outnumbered, he had emerged victorious time and time again. The enemies he faced had thought they were up against just one man, but he had proven them wrong. Having lived in servitude for 30 years, Hajin was determined to hold on to his newfound freedom at any cost. He was not willing to let his life be taken away from him so easily. And so, he stood his ground as the attackers closed in on him, his resolve unshaken. To the amazement of the other men, Hajin stood atop their swords, showing no fear or hesitation. And when the time was right, he leaped from the swords with an agility that left them all stunned. As the attackers realized that they were dealing with one of the top 10 strongest martial masters and the world's greatest assassin, they knew that they were in for a fierce battle. But Hajin was not one to back down. He launched a powerful attack that took them all by surprise, and in no time, he had defeated every last one of them. After a long and grueling battle, Hajin began to feel the weariness and injuries catching up to him. He wondered if the pursuers had finally given up, but to his surprise, they continued to chase after him relentlessly. The other side clearly underestimated Hajin's tenacity and strength, even after fighting until his blade became dull. Despite the overwhelming odds against him, Hajin refused to back down. He warned the attackers not to stand in his way, and with a swift motion, he used his martial technique to eliminate them. But the cost of the fight had taken a heavy toll on Hajin, and he was left exhausted and badly injured. As he struggled to catch his breath, he remembered someone's words that had haunted him for a long time. Hajin, you may be the world's best assassin, but you are nothing but a hunting dog for the righteous Heavenly Alliance leader. A soulless demon who kills without mercy or remorse. What do you know of life? Even the afterworld curses you for all the lives you have taken. Your life is nothing but a trail of death. As Hajin struggled to stay alive, he knew he had to keep going. He had spent his entire life serving the righteous Heavenly Alliance like a dog, but now, he had finally cut the ropes that bound him and had a chance at true freedom. He knew that if he could make it to the secret location nearby, he could heal his wounds with elixirs and herbs and finally be free. But as he stumbled through the forest, hunger gnawed at him. He hadn't eaten anything substantial in 7 days and was beginning to lose his mind with hunger. Just as he was about to collapse, he was suddenly attacked by an unknown assailant. Even Hajin, the world's greatest assassin, had failed to detect the stealthy attacker's approach. With his waning strength, Hajin knew he had to fight for his life once again. Hajin and the mysterious attacker engaged in a fierce battle for survival. Despite being weakened from his previous fight, Hajin was able to recognize the attacker's martial technique and realize that he was facing the renowned Death Lord, the strongest assassin in the southern Central Plains. Hajin understood why the righteous Heavenly Alliance was pursuing him, but he never expected to face off against the Steel King's 8 elites and Death Lord. With a mix of frustration and anger, Hajin confronted Death Lord, questioning whether he truly deserved his status as one of the top 10 strongest martial masters. Hajin refused to let Death Lord defeat him in his weakened state, and swore to cut him into pieces. Despite Death Lord's relentless attacks, Hajin ultimately emerged victorious, swiftly killing Death Lord with his sword. After slaying Death Lord, Hajin beckoned the person observing their battle from the shadows to reveal themselves. When they stepped into the light, Hajin was taken aback as it was none other than the secret demon queen herself. She remarked that it was an honor for Hajin to still remember her after 6 long years. The scene then shifts to the first elder of the righteous Heavenly Alliance, Young Ilryong, as his subordinate informs him that all the corpses in the area belong to the martial masters of the Steel Blood Fortress. The news shocks the first elder, who never expected Hajin to penetrate the inescapable net formation they had deployed and kill so many Steel Blood Fortress martial masters. Hajin truly lives up to his reputation as the Assassin King. Following this revelation, the elder instructs his subordinate to track the death energy of the secret demon queen, as that is likely where Hajin can be found. As the scene continued, Hajin was taken aback by the involvement of this insane murderer. He couldn't believe that they were using any means necessary to capture him, even resorting to such dangerous and unpredictable allies. The demon queen herself was maintaining her youthful appearance through a rejuvenation technique, despite being over 60 years old. Her unassuming face might make people think she couldn't harm a fly, but in truth, she was a ruthless killer who couldn't sleep a single night without killing someone. Despite the situation, Hajin had one more trick up his sleeve. The demon queen expressed her disappointment that he had drawn his sword first, given their special relationship. Hajin retorted, "Special relationship, my ass," and demanded that she stop spouting such nonsense. The demon queen then commented on Hajin's condition, suggesting that he wouldn't last long against her. Hajin replied, "Why don't you see how many strikes I can withstand? Why should I be afraid of a 60-year-old grandma who only knows how to talk shit?" The demon queen then warned Hajin not to call her grandma. If he called her grandma one more time, she would pull out his spine, no matter how much he begged her not to. Hajin then told the demon queen that it was so scary, and she became more sensitive to age when he hadn't seen her. "Grandma." Hajin's words then enraged the demon queen, but soon she calmed down and told Hajin that it was true that he was raised by the righteous Heavenly Alliance as their best assassin. It was logical for the Steel Blood Fortress to seek the demon queen's assistance in capturing Hajin. His core energy was infused with disgustingly pure and virtuous energies, which undoubtedly belonged to the great 9 sects. The demon queen was curious about how impressive Hajin's abilities were. Though they aimed to apprehend him unharmed, she wondered how he had managed to defeat all those masters. It was evident that Hajin had not only mastered the 9 sects' martial techniques but also the secret ones. Hajin's realization dawned upon him as he understood the true motives of the demon queen. She was after the hidden martial prowess of the 9 sects and confidential information about the righteous Heavenly Alliance. However, he knew that the demon queen had no intention of revealing these secrets to the Steel Blood Fortress, even if she managed to obtain them. Confirming Hajin's suspicion, the demon queen acknowledged that his guess was correct. Surprisingly, she revealed that she didn't even require the request of the Steel Blood Fortress nor the secrets of the righteous Heavenly Alliance. She desired the martial prowess of the 9 sects, and offered Hajin a deal. If he revealed it to the demon queen, she would spare his life. However, the proposition was unfair as Hajin was already dying. Shortly after, the demon queen mentioned the blood parasite, which astonished Hajin. The blood parasite would inflict punishment on those who betrayed the righteous Heavenly Alliance, determining their life and death. The leader of the righteous Heavenly Alliance had complete control over their fate, thanks to the blood parasite within their bodies. Due to this, Hajin could never abandon the righteous Heavenly Alliance. The Demon Queen told Hajin that she could remove the blood parasite, freeing him from any concerns related to the righteous Heavenly Alliance, whether he exposed the 9 sects' hidden martial prowess or other secrets. As a practitioner of the demonic arts of the god of death, the Demon Queen was well versed in toxins and poisons. With her expertise, she could eliminate the blood parasite inside Hajin's body. If Hajin shared the 9 sects' martial prowess with her, the Demon Queen would release him. After hearing the Demon Queen's offer, Hajin laughed at her and informed her that he had already learned how to expel the blood parasite 5 years ago. However, he needed to reach a higher level to break through the inescapable net formation, and it had taken him quite a long time to train for it. He advised the Demon Queen to stop uttering nonsense because he knew her detestable nature. 30 years of his life had been taken away by those bastards, and he would no longer be fooled by anyone else. The Demon Queen threatened Hajin that she never let anyone live after insulting her, but Hajin's eyes conveyed that he would never teach her martial prowess. So the Demon Queen attacked Hajin, resulting in a fierce battle between them, each unleashing their strongest martial powers to defeat the other. During the fight, the Demon Queen stabbed her nails into Hajin's hand. But before she could deliver a fatal blow, the first elder appeared and swiftly cut off Hajin's limbs. Seizing the opportunity, the Demon Queen plunged her hand through Hajin's chest and then decapitated him, ensuring that he would never speak again. In his final moments, as he drew his last breath, Hajin pondered whether this was to be his wretched fate. All he had ever wanted was an ordinary life, to be an ordinary man, just like any other human being. Was that too much to ask for? If only he could have another chance. In the present time, somewhere in a heavenly inner sanctuary of the divine demon cult, the 4th young lord was conferring with the physician. With a solemn tone, the physician informed him that he had just examined the 3rd young lord, Seorian, and predicted that he would not survive the night. Upon hearing this news, the 4th young lord cannot help but think that things are unfolding in his favor, perhaps even better than anticipated. The story then shifts to the perspective of the 3rd young lord, who is consumed with confusion as he suddenly finds himself reincarnated in a foreign body. As he tries to make sense of his surroundings, he begins to question where he is and what has happened to him. After opening the door to his room, he is left in shock, unable to fathom how such a place could exist in the world of Mirim. Just then, his attention is drawn to the sight of 2 men approaching him. In a state of uncertainty, he cannot help but wonder who they might be and what their intentions are. As they approached the room, the group included a physician and the first loyal guard of the demon cult, Mu Dam. Upon seeing the 3rd young lord, the physician was taken aback, clearly surprised by the young lord's appearance. However, Mu Dam greeted the young lord warmly, offering congratulations on his recovery. As the realization dawned on him, the protagonist couldn't help but feel a shock surge through his entire being. It suddenly became clear to him that he had been reincarnated as the 3rd young lord of the Heavenly Demon Divine Cult. The Heavenly Demon Divine Cult, also known as the 1,000-Year Demonic Cult, had a notorious reputation as the oldest and most malevolent demonic power of this generation. Founded by a Mirim master several thousand years ago, their martial prowess was unparalleled, making them the strongest force in the entire Mirim world. Just the mere presence of the cult was enough to evoke anxiety and chaos amongst the populace. Despite their immense power, they were outnumbered in terms of sheer numbers by the Federation of the Righteous Heavenly Alliance and the Steel Blood Fortress. These 3 groups together were referred to as the Powerful Triad, with the Heavenly Demon being held in higher regard than war and pandemics. The world at large considered them to be a formidable force to be reckoned with, and their reputation as such had only continued to grow over time. Meanwhile, after his encounter with the 3rd young lord, Mu Dam quickly made his way to report to the demon lord of the Heavenly Demon Cult. With a deep bow, he informed the demon lord that the young lord had awakened but had unfortunately lost all of his martial prowess due to overextension. After hearing the report, Mudam respectfully inquired about the demon lord's wishes regarding the third young lord. The demon lord instructed Mudam to refrain from providing any further updates until the closing ceremony, which was still 3 months away. With that, Mudam bowed once more and took his leave, expressing his sincere hope that the demon lord would succeed in his great undertaking. In the following scene, the third young lord ponders on how he ended up in this place and questions whether he really obtained a second life. However, the fact that he finds himself in the demon cult raises concerns. Despite this, he remains calm and focuses on grasping the current situation and planning for the future. Last night, he attempted to spy on people using his stealth technique, but he quickly realized that his weakened state made it difficult to execute the technique. He eventually overhears 2 demon cult disciples discussing him, noting that the strongest among the 7 demon cult disciples, the third young lord, is awake again. A bloody hierarchical battle will start again. It's a miracle to wake up after 6 months from a state of chi blockage. One of the disciples suggests that the young lord has lost all of his martial prowess, but if he still has some remaining, then he really lives up to his nickname, the monstrous demon. Due to the awakening of the monstrous demon, it is likely that it will feed on multiple individuals, draining them completely. After being humiliated by what he had heard, the protagonist couldn't help but feel a sense of embarrassment. It became clear to him that the body's previous owner was quite the troublemaker. However, despite the situation, the protagonist remained determined to find a way out of this demon cult. Although it was just an hour, last night's stealth technique was too much for that body. It was truly remarkable that this body was still functioning, despite being equivalent to that of an 80-year-old geezer. The first priority for the protagonist was to regain control over his body. Upon examining his body, he realized that his 8 extraordinary meridians were in disarray. With his knowledge and expertise, the protagonist worked to remove the small and rotten Danjian. As he did so, the surrounding air became damp, but with the help of the Boundless technique, the protagonist was able to expel the clouded energy from his body. Having lived a past life where he mastered several martial arts techniques from 9 sects, the protagonist had managed to create his very own martial prowess, the Boundless technique. It had been his lifeline, especially since he had no status or backing to speak of. As he opened his eyes in his new body, he couldn't help but wonder if this was the limit of his abilities. Nevertheless, he had already achieved a small goal, which was a good start. However, the unnerving silence around him made him uneasy. It had been a while since he had woken up, and apart from the doctor, no one had come to visit him. The protagonist couldn't help but suspect that the body's previous owner was a troublemaker with a less than desirable personality. But he knew better than to act recklessly before understanding his surroundings. 3 months have flown by since then. The story now takes us to the 4th young lord, Han Yuemun, who is inquiring of the physician, telling it's been 3 months since he's eaten it, yet there's been no visible changes. To this, the physician responds that instead, he seems to be recovering at a faster pace. Something strange is going on. 4th young lord, Han Yuemun, then said Xiaoyang always exceeds his expectations. The conversation then shifts to Rin's expected arrival. The 4th young lord inquires about the time of Rin's arrival, to which the physician replies that she should be arriving at the main temple around noon. It's been 6 months since Rin's departure, and 4th young lord hints that something intriguing is about to happen soon. The story then takes us to the 3rd young lord, who is seen practicing his martial arts in his room. Having successfully recovered from his weakened state, he is now able to fully utilize his martial prowess without any hindrance. He had given it his all for the last 3 months to bring his shitty body back to normal, and as a result, the remaining cloudy energy and demonic energy have dissipated. While he was taking his herbal medicine, memories of his past life continued to haunt him. However, he managed to regain his composure and pondered, will he ever be free in this life? After finishing his training, as the young lord was getting ready, he overheard a commotion outside his room, followed by a sound of a slap. Suddenly, a girl appeared in his room and greeted him, saying, it's been a while." The young lord was taken aback and wondered who she was. Upon seeing the protagonist, she remarked that he looked better than she had expected. However, the protagonist was unfamiliar with her and felt the need to escape from the situation. He hastily claimed that he had urgent business elsewhere. However, his attempts to leave were thwarted by her guards who blocked the door. Sensing his unease, she reassured the guards that she intended to have a long conversation with the third young lord and requested them to prevent any interruptions. With the door now shut, she urged the protagonist to take a seat as they had much to discuss. The protagonist told her he is feeling uncomfortable in his sweaty clothes, requested some time to change before continuing the conversation. The woman agreed to wait, and even suggested that he postpone any other engagements he might have had. As he looked at her, the protagonist couldn't shake the feeling that there was something extraordinary about this woman, but he realized that he had no choice but to engage with her. Turning to his maid, he instructed her to follow him closely. He then inquired about the woman's identity, and explained that he had lost his memories after recovering from the QI blockage. Upon hearing the protagonist's explanation, his maid revealed that the girl's name was Hung Yiren. Yiren was a demon who worked for the religion's internal enlightenment facility, and was affiliated with the Jiaxa family, which was a part of the demon cult. She was renowned for her immense strength and talent, and was regarded as a heroine by the demonic cult's chief. In addition, Yiren was also the younger sister of the fourth young lord. The protagonist was curious about his relationship with Yiren and why she was seeking him out, but his maid didn't have all the details. Nonetheless, they had encountered each other several times in the past month, leading the protagonist to believe that their relationship was more significant than he had originally thought. After expressing his gratitude, he asked his maid if her face was alright, as it appeared to be quite swollen. Concerned for her well-being, he urged her to go and rest. His maid was taken aback by his compassion, as she recalled the third young lord's previous demeanor being vastly different. Following his conversation with the maid, the protagonist approached Yiren and apologized for his earlier rudeness, admitting that he had acted thoughtlessly. In response, Yiren told him that it was okay. When the protagonist asked why she was there, Yiren couldn't help but notice his mild demeanor and thought to herself that he must have lost his martial prowess after coming out of the QI blockage. She wasted no time and immediately brought up the contract, which bore both their seals. According to the terms of the contract, if either of them violated it, or if an event occurred which required them to terminate the agreement, the penalty would be tripled. She had invested nearly 1,000 niang in the miracle drug alone, and along with the additional funds from other sources, the total amount came to just over 2,000 niang. However, she would take out the little things because they were close. The protagonist was shocked to learn that the fourth young lord's younger sister had been sponsoring his previous body owner with money and medicine. He couldn't help but wonder what the previous owner had been thinking at the time. Yiren then proceeded to inform him that he owed her a total of 6,000 niang, which included the cost of the wonder drug and additional expenses. She suggested that if he found it difficult to pay her back, he could write up a contract outlining when he would be able to repay her. The protagonist couldn't help but feel that Yiren was trying to take advantage of the situation by making herself out to be the victim and invalidating the previous contract. He had been bedridden due to the chi blockage, and he believed that she was disregarding his circumstances. However, the protagonist wanted to build his reputation and then increase his wealth. Thus, he instructed his maid to prepare the necessary writing materials so that he could draft a new contract. The protagonist was irked by Yiren's attitude and couldn't help but feel that she was trying to take advantage of him. Despite this, he managed to complete the contract and included a clause stating that the contract would end once Yiren received the money. Yiren, on the other hand, was surprised by the protagonist's recklessness in drafting the contract, but nonetheless reminded him that if he can't pay her back, he'll have to come when she calls for him like a loyal dog. She also added that they should respect each other until the contract was fulfilled. The protagonist then told Yiren that she wants him to be respectful when he is handing over this type of contract. He then proceeded to summon the commander of the royal guards, instructing him to prepare a carriage as he had urgent business to attend to. The commander, however, expressed concerns about the protagonist's physical condition. Undeterred, the protagonist revealed his destination to be the Demon Lord's abode. Yurin was taken aback by this revelation, prompting her to inquire about his intentions. It was then that the protagonist explained his desire to verify the fairness of the contract. After hearing his reasoning, Yurin was left astounded by his boldness, recognizing the danger in his decision. The protagonist calmly asserted that he needed to fight back, as he wanted to ensure the fairness of the contract. However, Yurin also conveyed her belief that presenting the contract to the Demon Lord would be akin to putting their lives on the line. She further cautioned him that his association with her could put him in grave danger, as the Demon Lord would see her as a threat. The protagonist acknowledged the gravity of Yurin's concerns, recognizing that his association with her could have dire consequences for both of them. He understood that if the Demon Lord were to discover their contract, he too would face harsh punishment, possibly even exile due to his diminished martial prowess. However, the protagonist also highlighted the potential risks to Yurin, as her family's reputation might not be enough to protect her from imprisonment. He noted that in the worst-case scenario, the Gyoxa family would suffer complete ruin for the perceived failure of raising their daughter. Upon hearing the protagonist's words, Yurin asked him if he did not aspire to become the supreme leader. The protagonist quickly dismissed the idea, stating that it was ridiculous since his body was not capable of that. He reminded her that she was aware of his limitations when she came here. However, he tells her to accompany him to the Demon Lord's palace. Yurin's face turned red with embarrassment, and she asked the protagonist what she could do to prevent him from going to the Demon Lord. The protagonist looked at her intently, and told her that she needed to rip the contract with her own hands. The story then shifted to the protagonist's past life, where Hajin and his friend had completed a task given to him by the righteous sect leader. Afterward, he and his friend took a break, but he reminded his friend that they couldn't stay for long as the leader had warned them against detection. During their rest, Hajin noticed his friend holding a bird carving. After showing it to him, his friend asked if he was tired of living as an assassin. His friend then shared his plan of escaping and living freely in the rural regions, away from the scent of blood. Hajin expressed his desire to join him, but his friend firmly refused, telling him not to even think about it. The story then takes us to a tragic sight, where Hajin stands before a lifeless child and his grieving mother, while his group searches for any survivors to eliminate. Despite their efforts, they couldn't find anyone left alive. Hajin told his subordinates that those people had betrayed the alliance and committed treason, orders his subordinates to search the nearby population. In the midst of the search, he notices a carving of a bird in the child's hand, and memories come flooding back to him. In that moment, an unexpected visitor arrives, Hajin's old friend. As he looks upon the devastating scene, he realizes that Hajin's subordinates had killed his wife and child. Fueled by anger and grief, he attacks and kills Hajin's subordinates. Hajin confided in his old friend that the alliance leader had tasked them with eliminating those who had betrayed the alliance, branding them as traitors who had committed treason. However, he admitted that he didn't have much knowledge about the matter. In response, his old friend said that is killing people just a job for him, and taking someone's life was akin to committing murder every day. He reassured Hajin that an assassin wouldn't have much insight into the situation. Despite this, his old friend couldn't help but curse Hajin when he was dying, warning him that his life would ultimately be haunted by the deaths of all those he had murdered, even in the afterlife. In the present scene, the Demon Lord prepared himself for the day ahead. His attention was drawn to Mu Dam, the first royal guard, who had come to inform him that the third young lord was seeking an audience. Mu Dam had already dispatched a carriage to the third young lord's abode, and he was expected to arrive at the palace soon. Upon hearing this news, the Demon Lord instructed Mu Dam to lead the third young lord to the demonic judgment pavilion. The first royal guard was taken aback by this unexpected directive, but followed his lord's command and departed. Meanwhile, the physician finished checking the protagonist's pulse. The protagonist still can't get used to the chaotic aura that flows in when the physician feels his pulse. However, there was good news in store for him. The physician declared that the damaged veins seemed to have fully recovered, leaving the protagonist surprised but relieved. The physician was equally amazed by the protagonist's regenerative abilities, and couldn't help but express his shock. Unfortunately, the protagonist did not like the physician's gaze, finding it intrusive and unsettling. Sensing the protagonist's unease, the physician quickly apologized and asked for his forgiveness. He then went on to share his belief that the protagonist's regenerative powers were so potent that he would no longer require acupuncture or any other form of assistance to heal. Curious about the supreme healing potion, the protagonist inquires with the physician, admitting that he has never heard of it before. The physician responds by explaining that it is a specially crafted decoction composed of fine herbs known to aid in the recovery of one's energy. He goes on to mention that the potion is exclusively handcrafted by skilled artisans within the household, and only served to the highest-ranking members of the main sanctuary. Upon learning about the potion's potential medicinal benefits, the protagonist can't help but wonder if it would help speed up his own recovery process. As their conversation draws to a close, the physician informs the protagonist that he'll be back in 2 days to check on his progress. He expresses his hope that the third young lord will recover quickly. As the physician leaves the room, the protagonist finds himself lost in thought about his impending meeting with the heavenly demon. Like many others within Kanghomirim, he too is filled with a sense of curiosity about this enigmatic figure, who may well be the strongest person alive. Though the heavenly demon has never revealed the full extent of his powers, he is widely considered to be one of the most formidable people in the world. However, the protagonist is also aware of the potential danger that comes with associating with the demon cult. He realizes that his lack of knowledge about the cult could put him in a precarious position when he meets the heavenly demon. Should he have been more cautious? Only if that Hong Yiren, daughter of the Jiaxa family, or whatever, didn't shove a ridiculous contract in his face. As he continues to contemplate his situation, the protagonist wonders what kind of person the heavenly demon really is, and whether he will be able to handle the encounter. Moments later, the protagonist's maid delivers the news that they have received a message from the demon god's palace, and that the carriage is ready to take them there. The protagonist feels ready to face the heavenly demon, and decides that he might as well confront him head-on. With a deep breath, the protagonist opens the door to his room, preparing to make his way to the demon palace. Though he knows that the situation could be dangerous, he is determined to see it through and face whatever challenges lie ahead. The protagonist walks out of his room, ready to embark on this new chapter in his life. Soon the protagonist arrived at the heavenly demon palace and disembarked from his carriage. One of the guards informed him that the demon lord had summoned him to the demonic judgment pavilion and directed him to follow a guide. As he followed the guide, he caught sight of a mountain in the distance where the pavilion was located. The protagonist was taken aback by the sight and began to wonder about the purpose of this ominous structure. As he climbed the mountain, he couldn't help but ponder whether this was truly the headquarters of the demon cult, given the large number of guards present. Meanwhile, the heavenly demon was enjoying some alcohol in the demonic judgment pavilion. The situation was eerily similar to when the protagonist had been trapped in the inescapable formation by the righteous Heavenly Alliance and the Steel Blood Fortress. High-level masters completely surrounded the area. It felt as if he was in a dragon's den or a tiger's lair, where one wrong move could result in his demise. Despite the danger, he approached the door of the demonic judgment pavilion with a calm exterior, knowing that his every move could determine whether he would survive in the demon cult. Upon entering the pavilion, the protagonist was pleasantly surprised by the stunning sight. Although it was winter outside, the pavilion seemed to be experiencing the weather of spring. He wondered whether he was dreaming or whether this was an illusion, since he couldn't fathom how this sight could be real. While strolling through the demonic judgment pavilion, the protagonist couldn't help but express his desire to retire from Kangho and live in a place surrounded by lush greenery, similar to the place of his dreams. He marveled at the realistic illusion technique used to create this stunning environment. As he reached out to touch a flower in the garden, a voice suddenly spoke to him, causing him to feel frightened. Following the voice, he spotted a pavilion that he was certain wasn't there a moment ago, and he noticed a figure standing inside. As the protagonist advanced towards the pavilion, his each step represented a delicate balance between life and death. The first step symbolized life, while the second step represented death. His feet seemed to move of their own accord, as though he had been bewitched. Meanwhile, the heavenly demon watched with interest, pondering whether this was the demonic judgment pavilion that the third had envisioned. As the protagonist arrived at the pavilion, his instincts as the assassin king warned him of the danger lurking within. Nevertheless, he knew that he had no choice but to press on if he wished to escape the clutches of the demon cult and begin a new life. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside the pavilion, knowing that he was about to face the demon lord himself. He was the 9th person to have been summoned by the great 9th heavenly demon in the demon cult, Li Chansang. As he entered, the heavenly demon cast his gaze upon him. As the protagonist faced the heavenly demon inside the pavilion, outside, the first royal guard questioned the guide about the third young lord's entrance. The guide confirmed that he had indeed entered the pavilion. Sensing that something was amiss, the guide asked the first royal guard if he was troubled by something, but the guard remained silent. The guide quickly apologized, realizing that he had overstepped his boundaries. The first royal guard then explained that, under the demon lord's reign, there had only been 2 instances when outsiders were allowed to enter the demonic judgment pavilion. The first time was about 25 years ago, when the Lord had taken in his first disciple. After hearing the question, the guide inquired if the heavenly demon's first disciple was the first young lord. However, the first royal guard clarified that it wasn't the case. He stated that the first young lord became the demon lord's disciple exactly 20 years ago. Curious, the guide then asked if there was another disciple before the first young lord. The royal guard confirmed this and revealed that there was an unknown disciple who lurked in the shadows. This disciple met his demise at the demonic judgment pavilion, where his skin was ripped apart as if wild animals had attacked him. The guide's curiosity led to another question: did the demon lord himself cause the brutal death of the unknown disciple? The first royal guard clarified that it wasn't the case. He reasoned that if the demon lord had intended to kill him, he wouldn't have brought him here in the first place. Further, the guide asked about the identity of the second person who had entered the demonic judgment pavilion. The royal guard revealed that it was none other than the general strategist, a person of absolute authority who looked after both small and big matters. He had climbed his way to the top through his intelligence and strategic thinking, rather than martial arts. The royal guard added that the strategist had entered the pavilion with confidence and walked out with his head held high. The first royal guard mentioned that the demonic judgment pavilion has opened its gates for the 3rd time today. He then pondered out loud, wondering whether the third young lord would be able to come out of the pavilion alive or not. Meanwhile, the protagonist greeted the demon lord. He instructed him to raise his head. Upon seeing the demon lord, the protagonist was struck by the realization that he was indeed different. He is the grand demonic master and the ruler of all. Although the demon lord did not emit any apparent aura, the protagonist sensed the immense dignity that he possessed. The protagonist mused that the demon lord was someone who had no reason to be limited by the confines of being one of the top 10 strongest martial artists. Instead, he was the world's most powerful martial god, considered to be half immortal and dwelling in an entirely different dimension. With this realization, the protagonist couldn't help but wonder, why didn't the demon lord try to become a tyrant? The demon lord then poured some fragrant alcohol and offered it to the protagonist, who eagerly accepted it and savored the taste. He couldn't help but wonder when was the last time he had such fancy booze. As he was drinking, the demon lord asked the protagonist about the reason behind his request to see him. The protagonist couldn't help but feel that the demon lord was cold, and he wondered if masters and disciples in this region were always so harsh towards one another. Regardless, He sensed that the demon lord didn't like to beat around the bush, so he decided to cut to the chase and be direct with him. The protagonist hesitated before finally mustering the courage to ask the demon lord for a favor. The demon lord asked him what it was, and the protagonist replied by requesting permission to leave the cult. The demon lord then instructed him to pour some alcohol in the drinking bowl, which made the protagonist feel like he was going crazy because he couldn't read the demon lord's facial expression or figure out what he was thinking. As he poured the alcohol, the demon lord clarified if the protagonist was saying that he wanted to leave for a while or if he wanted to completely cut ties with the cult. The protagonist was shocked by the question, and the demon lord followed up by asking if he didn't like being his disciple. The protagonist quickly clarified that this was not the case. The demon lord then inquired of the protagonist whether he had given up, seeing how exhausted his body had become. Expressing disappointment, the demon lord appeared skeptical. However, the protagonist quickly clarified that he is not trying to sever ties with the demon cult. It had only been a short while since his recovery, and in the meantime, he had lost his martial prowess. Despite a deep desire to pull himself together, it was proving to be a more challenging task than he anticipated. Thus, he had decided to take a step back and go out for some fresh air to clear his mind. It was this need for respite that led the protagonist to approach the demon today with his request. Upon hearing the protagonist's request, the demon lord reacted with surprise and thrust his drinking bowl, questioning whether the protagonist had only sought permission to go out. The protagonist couldn't help but feel careless, realizing the absurdity of the situation. After all, he had come to request an audience with the ruler of all, the demon lord of the heavenly demon divine cult, for the sole purpose of seeking permission for a simple outing. The protagonist, realizing the foolishness of his previous request, began to offer another excuse. He explained to the demon lord that he had also wanted to see him after a long time. The demon lord's reaction to this statement was not unfavorable, and the conversation continued. The protagonist then expressed his belief that despite his physical state, he still had duties to fulfill as a disciple. Additionally, he acknowledged that he could never fully repay the kindness the demon lord had shown him, and regretted not having the opportunity to express his gratitude properly. The protagonist hoped to evoke some emotion in the demon lord by playing the sentiment card, as he hoped to make amends for his earlier request. Upon hearing the protagonist's words, the demon lord's drinking bowl began to disintegrate into dust, which left the protagonist in a state of shock. The demon lord then questioned the protagonist, asking if he had just mentioned the duties of a disciple. He stood up and continued, saying that if the protagonist truly knew his duties, he would not have appeared before him in such a weakened state. The protagonist couldn't help but feel a sense of panic, wondering if the demon lord had somehow discovered that he is not Seorian. It felt as though the demon lord was piercing into his very soul with his gaze. Overwhelmed, the protagonist wondered how he could possibly excuse his behavior this time. After a moment, the protagonist realized that he had not been caught in his deception. However, he couldn't help but feel a sense of frustration at the demon lord's reaction. After all, he had come to pay his respects as soon as he had recovered from his chi blockage. How could the demon lord question his understanding of his duties as a disciple? The protagonist couldn't help but wonder what was missing from the demon lord's perspective. The demon lord then informed the protagonist that he would send someone within the next 3 days, and that he was free to leave. However, the protagonist couldn't help but wonder about his earlier request for an outing. Was he allowed to go outside or not? He wished the demon lord would just tell him directly instead of leaving him in a state of uncertainty. With that, the protagonist left the demonic judgment pavilion, while the demon lord stood there talking to himself about the beautiful view of clear skies and green pastures. It had been a long time since he had seen such a sight. The scene then shifted to the demon lord's palace, where he poured alcohol for his first royal guard as a reward for his hard work. The guard graciously accepted and took a sip. The demon lord then inquired about the third young lord and asked what was going on with him. The first royal guard informed the demon lord that the third young lord had been recovering at his home. The demon lord then inquired if there was anything else, as the third seemed to be doing quite well. He recounted how he had picked up the third young lord 10 years ago, mistaking him for an emugi, only to find out that he was just a venomous snake. However, today he saw that the third had a magic pearl in his mouth and was gaining a deeper understanding of death while distancing himself from evil. Upon hearing this, the first royal guard was taken aback. Because the demonic judgment pavilion was a place where evil was judged, and the object to be judged was brought forth by the demon lord. The judgment was given by the demon lord in the formation, and it embodied the heart of those who entered it, revealing their current and subconscious state. If the object of judgment was not to the demon lord's liking, the demonic formation of the pavilion would attack them depending on the demon lord's will. As soon as they harbored any intention to kill, they would be destroyed in a wretched way. It was a formation technique that could find out one's true intentions, and it was of the highest level that only the demon lord could cast. The heavenly demon then inquired of the first royal guard about the well-being of the solitary bamboo grove. With confidence, the guard replied that the court of elders had been appointed to maintain it every other day and that there had been an average of 5 casualties a month, but thankfully, no deaths in the past 4 months. Pleased with the response, the demon lord instructed that the court of elders withdraw their personnel for the time being, as he would be sending the third to the solitary bamboo grove. The first royal guard was taken aback and asked, "To the solitary bamboo grove?" To which the demon lord affirmed that it was the perfect place to get some fresh air. The demon lord wasted no time in sending the protagonist to the solitary bamboo grove. As the protagonist arrived, he couldn't help but wonder why he had been sent to such an isolated place. He had only requested to go out, so why had the demon lord sent him to this desolate location all by himself? He couldn't shake the feeling that he had done something wrong to deserve such a punishment. Frustrated and angry, he cursed the demon lord, calling him an asshole. Protagonist's scream echoed through the entire area, startling the nearby birds. While he wept, he couldn't help but wonder how this could be a good place to get some fresh air. He continued to curse the demon lord out loud, thinking that he was all alone in the middle of nowhere. However, he was surprised when he suddenly heard someone speak from behind him. The person apologized for interrupting him, and warned him that it was dangerous to speak ill of the demon lord. The stranger then asked him what he had said and informed him that any abusive language towards the demon lord was considered a serious offense punishable by immediate death. This applied to everyone, even young lords and ladies. The protagonist advised the other person to listen carefully. He didn't say anything bad about the demon lord. The other person apologized for misunderstanding. The protagonist Hujin didn't talk negatively about the demon lord because he realized that the members of the demon cult admire their leader even more than the emperor. As he looked at the man's face, Hujin realized that the demon cult considers their leader to be a true god, rather than just a member of the royalty. The protagonist then inquired if the man was a member of the court of elders. With a nod, the man confirmed that he was indeed from the court. He introduced himself as Dongpil, the third leader of the heavenly demon divine cult's court of elders. Greeting the protagonist, Dongpil expressed his enthusiasm for serving as the protagonist's personal guard. He considered it an honor to do so. Although Dongpil's words were sincere, the protagonist couldn't care less about his honor. All he wanted was for Dongpil to leave him alone. But Dongpil's burning passion shone through as he made a solemn vow to dedicate himself to the protagonist's safety, even if it meant risking his own life. The scene then shifted to latter day. We found the protagonist deep in thought. Despite his best efforts, he couldn't seem to leave the place he was in. He let out a cry of frustration, expressing his hatred for the demon cult that had exiled him there. All he wanted was to escape, but it seemed impossible. After a moment of reflection, the protagonist realized that he couldn't afford to waste any more time on useless thoughts. He reminded himself that leaving the demon cult was never going to be easy, so he might as well make the best of his situation. In that moment, the protagonist began to question why he had wanted to leave the demon cult in the first place. Was it because of a premonition that he had upon discovering his reincarnation as the third young lord of the divine demon cult? Despite the fact that he would eventually have to leave this place, it was impossible for him to do so at this moment. He had no choice but to continue living in the demon cult as the third young lord. To do that, he realized, he would need power. He would need to become stronger if he wanted to survive in the demon cult. And so, with newfound determination, he set out on a path of self-improvement, determined to do whatever it took to become the strongest he could be. The heavenly demon divine cult was notorious for its strict adherence to the survival of the fittest ideology. Among all the other groups in Nirim, there was no place for Hajin to passively wait and be culled and kicked out. In the end, he would have to take the path of martial arts, even if it meant risking his life. The protagonist had a realization that he could no longer resort to petty tricks to survive. Instead, he would use his power to walk out of the cult with his head held high. With his unwavering determination and his commitment to increasing his strength, he was confident that he could achieve his goals through sheer force of will. It was not going to be easy, but he knew that with his own strength, he could overcome any obstacle that came his way. As the protagonist pondered his future, Dongpil suddenly appeared behind him and announced that his meal was ready. The sudden appearance startled the protagonist, who was not expecting Dongpil to be there. The protagonist declined Dongpil's offer and asked him not to bother him. Dongpil, concerned for the young lord's well-being, explained that it had been 2 days since their arrival, and the protagonist had not even had a sip of water or eaten anything. The young lord's health was his top priority, and he urged him to take care of himself. After conveying his message, Dongpil departed from the area. For 3 days, the protagonist remained in the solitary bamboo grove, utilizing the Boundless technique to strengthen his body and soul. During this time, he noticed that the circulation of QI from the Boundless technique felt different from usual, a revelation that piqued his curiosity and made him even more determined to master the technique. The protagonist had already attained the 3rd stage of the Boundless technique, a remarkable feat considering his weakened physical state due to chi blockage. The Boundless technique was divided into 5 stages of power, and in his previous life as the Assassin King, he had reached the peak of the 4th stage. In the Boundless technique, the harmony between the martial arts and the physical body was crucial to achieving power, even more so than achieving enlightenment. Despite his physical limitations, the protagonist was already on the cusp of advancing to the 4th stage of power, making him wonder if Xiaoriang, the previous owner of the body, was a genius. The protagonist marveled at the potential of his current body and pondered how far he could go with it. With his unwavering determination and years of experience as an assassin, he was confident that he could achieve greatness beyond what he had accomplished in his previous life. In addition to the Boundless technique, the Purification technique had also automatically activated, further enhancing the protagonist's potential. This technique cleansed the air by drawing in the turbid chi in the surroundings and incorporating it into the body's internalized power through the Boundless technique's suppression ability. As the air around the area became purified, the efficiency of the internalization of power multiplied, which accelerated the protagonist's advancement. Thanks to the Purification technique, the protagonist realized that he would be able to regain his previous power sooner than he initially thought. The prospect of regaining his former strength filled him with a renewed sense of purpose, motivating him to continue his training in the solitary bamboo grove. He knew that he would need all the power he could muster to get away from the heavenly demon divine cult. After realizing that, the protagonist begins to advance to the 4th stage of the Boundless technique. 5 days after entering the solitary bamboo grove, the protagonist's body is completely healed now. The tattered blood pathways and vital organs have become much healthier than this body's physical age. Thanks to that, life in the solitary bamboo grove has become much easier than expected. After that, the protagonist's hair color has darkened, and it seems that everything he eats is delicious thanks to Dongpil's excellent cooking. He's been sleeping well, too. What's more, the abilities he possessed in his previous life as an assassin have returned to him. One of those abilities, Hypersensation, was acquired during his reign as the Assassin King. It's a natural ability that arose from his frequent brushes with death and his experience surviving as an assassin. The martial art that amplifies this hypersensation is known as the Heavenly Net 6 Power Technique. The protagonist then utilized Omniscient Sight, a martial art that rapidly heightens one's 5 senses to the extreme, surpassing even that of any beast. Without even turning his head, he could vividly sense all of his surroundings. The protagonist smiled at first but soon started sobbing, hating himself for adapting so well to a place like this. As he was lost in thought, Dongpil appeared behind him and informed him that the meal was ready. The protagonist got scared and told Dongpil that if he continued to act this way, it wouldn't be good for him. Dongpil replied, "Yes, my lord." Upon hearing that, the protagonist thought to himself, "This bastard, he's pretending to be dumb so he can keep pranking me, right?" Dongpil warned the protagonist to head back because the demonic monsters would become active once the sun went down. As they started to make their way back, the protagonist thought to himself, "Finally, I've established the foundation needed to practice martial arts properly. If I can integrate the experience and knowledge I gained as the Assassin King into this talented body, I can become strong again in no time." As the protagonist was lost in his thought, Dongpil noticed something behind the bamboo grove and wondered, "Is that a ghost?" Shortly after, the protagonist began training his Boundless technique once again, which proved to be incredibly effective in restoring his body to a certain extent. With his body on the mend, he felt confident enough to employ his flying technique once more, and to his delight, his 2 martial arts abilities had also returned. The Boundless technique had rejuvenated his body, while the Heavenly Net 6 Power technique had sharpened his hypersenses. The only missing piece of the puzzle was the Dark Shadow Chi, an elusive technique that combined the elite hidden skills of the 10 great sections. These 3 martial abilities were the foundational arts that had earned the protagonist his reputation as the legendary Assassin King, Hajin. Armed with these skills, he knew he could regain his strength in no time at all. As his mind pondered over the possibility of learning the elusive Dark Shadow Chi technique, the protagonist couldn't help but wonder if he was even allowed to learn it. After all, he was now the 3rd young Lord Seoryang, not Hajin, and this is the Heavenly Demon Divine Cult. He was certain that the previous owner of his body was already practicing some form of demonic art. Seeking answers, he called for Dongpil, who suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Turning to Dongpil, the protagonist asked if any of his brothers had not yet mastered a demonic art, or if anyone had learned a martial art that wasn't demonic in nature. Upon hearing the protagonist's question, Dongpil initially seemed confused and apologized for not understanding. The protagonist then proceeded to ask what would happen if he chose not to learn any demonic arts. In response, Dongpil expressed doubt that such a decision would even be possible, as it would greatly displease the Demon Lord. Determined to learn more about the subject, the protagonist ordered Dongpil to head to the library immediately and, with the authority of the 3rd young lord, retrieve all the secret texts he could borrow on the topic of demonic arts. Hey there! Are you enjoying our YouTube content and want to support us even more? Consider becoming a member of our channel. By joining our membership, you'll get access to exclusive perks such as custom badges and emojis, members-only live chats, early access to videos, and more. To join, simply click the Join button located on our channel page and choose the membership level that's right for you. You can cancel anytime, and your support will help us continue creating high-quality content for you to enjoy. Thank you so much for your support, and we look forward to having you as a member of our community. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you want to see the next part of this video, please let me know by liking this video and subscribing to my channel.